let your eyes grow heavy and let your thoughts go loose like a hand slowly opening. There is nowhere to be right now. There is nothing to solve. Just let the mind drift, unspooling like a thread from a spindle that nobody is watching. A spoon stirs honey in a small white cup. Round and round, slow, thick, golden. The honey clings to the spoon in a long ribbon before falling back into itself. Round and round. There is no hurry in this stirring. It could go on forever, or stop right now, and either way would be fine. Picture a field of snow, flat and undisturbed, stretching out toward a line of gray trees. No footprints, no wind, just snow, sitting quietly under a sky the color of a folded blanket. Somewhere far off, a single black bird lifts from a branch, shakes snow from its wings, and settles again. A marble rolls across a wooden floor, slow and steady, glass clicking softly against the old boards. It rolls under a chair, pauses, rolls a little more, and comes to rest against the leg of a bookshelf. The marble is blue, with a thread of white swirled through its center, like a tiny frozen storm that decided to be calm instead. Somewhere, a library holds its books very still. Rows and rows of spines, red, green, brown, faded gold lettering. Dust sits on the top shelf, undisturbed for years, gently glowing where a thin beam of afternoon light touches it. Nobody is reading. The books wait, patient, the way old furniture waits. A gray cat walks along the top of a fence, one paw after another, slow and sure. It doesn't look down. It doesn't look anywhere in particular. It simply walks, the fence stretching on and on into a yard full of long grass and one crooked apple tree. Clouds move without hurry across a pale sky. One looks like a spoon. One looks like nothing at all, just a soft gray smudge. One looks like a sleeping dog, curled in on itself, drifting slowly eastward, unraveling at the edges as it goes. A set of keys hangs on a hook by a door, swaying very slightly, though there is no wind inside. They catch a little light and let it go again. Somewhere in another room, a clock ticks, but so quietly that it barely counts as sound, more like a pulse in the wall. Moss grows on a stone near a small stream. Soft, green, damp. The stream moves over smooth pebbles, murmuring to itself. not saying anything in particular. A single leaf floats past, spins once, and continues on its way toward somewhere unnamed. A paper boat drifts down a rain-wet gutter, tilting gently side to side, following the curve of the street. It passes a drain, hesitates, and keeps going, carried by water that doesn't seem to be in any rush either. Far off, a train moves across a hillside, small as a toy, puffing a thin ribbon of smoke that dissolves into the sky almost as soon as it appears. The hills are green, rounded, quiet, dotted here and there with sheep who are not doing anything except standing. A ball of gray yarn rolls slowly off the edge of a wooden table, unwinding as it falls, landing in a soft heap on a rug the color of oatmeal. Nobody picks it up. It just sits there, breathing in its own slow way, the way things do when no one needs anything from them. A jar of buttons sits on a windowsill. Red ones, blue ones, one shaped like a tiny flower, one plain and white with 4 holes. Someone once sorted them by color and then stopped halfway, and now they simply exist together, mismatched and unbothered by it. A candle flame flickers in a dark room, leaning first one way, then another, casting soft shadows that stretch and shrink along the wall. The wax pools slowly at its base, clear and warm, dripping every so often in a way that makes almost no sound at all. Snowflakes land on a wool mitten, one at a time, each one different, each one melting slowly into the fibers. Somewhere, a person breathes out a small cloud of fog that drifts upward and disappears. A spiral staircase winds up inside a lighthouse. Iron steps cool and slightly rusted at the edges. Light falls in from a small round window partway up, illuminating dust that hangs in the air, turning slowly, going nowhere in particular. A field of dandelions releases its seeds into a breeze that barely exists. The little white parachutes lift, drift, spin, and sink again into the grass a few feet away, over and over, as though practicing for a flight that never quite begins. A bowl of oranges sits on a table in a kitchen with yellow walls. The oranges are round, a little dimpled, smelling faintly sweet. Nobody has touched them today. They simply wait there, warm from the afternoon sun through the window. A violin bow moves slowly across a single string, drawing out a long, low note that fades into silence before the next one begins. There is no melody, just this one note, patient and unhurried, filling the room and then leaving it again. Sand falls slowly through a narrow glass neck, grain by grain, piling into a small cone at the bottom. Some grains tumble down the sides of the pile and settle. The top narrows. The bottom widens. Nothing else happens. Nothing else needs to. A row of laundry hangs on a line in a quiet yard. Shirts and sheets swaying gently. The fabric pale in the afternoon light. A single sock has come loose from its pin and lies folded over the line, content to stay that way. Somewhere, a fish tank glows softly in a dark room, blue-green light rippling across the ceiling. A single orange fish drifts past a plastic castle, fins moving lazily, in no hurry to get anywhere, because there is nowhere in the tank that isn't already home. A wooden rocking chair on a porch moves back and forth, very slightly, though no one sits in it. The porch boards are gray and worn smooth. Somewhere beyond the railing, crickets begin their slow evening chorus, one calling, then another, then a soft chorus of small sounds stitched together. A ball of dough rests under a checked cloth on a counter, rising slowly, quietly, in its own time. Flour dusts the countertop in a thin, uneven layer. A rolling pin lies beside it, waiting, though not impatient about it. A row of ants moves along the edge of a garden path, each one carrying something too small to see clearly, following the ant before it without question, disappearing one by one into a crack in the stone. Somewhere a chalkboard holds the ghost of old writing, wiped clean, but not quite gone, pale gray smudges where numbers or letters used to be. A single piece of chalk rests in the tray below, worn down to a stub. A curtain moves gently at an open window, white and thin, billowing softly inward and falling back again, over and over, in rhythm with a breeze too gentle to feel on skin, but just enough to stir fabric. A row of bicycles leans against a brick wall outside a shop that has closed for the evening. Their wheels are still, spokes catching the last low light of the day. One has a basket with a single fallen leaf resting inside it. A pot of tea sits under a knitted cozy, steam curling faintly from the spout, rising and dispersing into the cool kitchen air. Somewhere a cup waits beside it, empty, patient, ready, but in no rush to be filled. A single feather drifts down from somewhere above, rocking gently side to side in the air, taking its time, landing finally on a stone path where it lies still, pale and soft against the gray. A row of jars of jam sits on a pantry shelf, labeled in careful handwriting: plum, apricot, blackberry. The light catching the deep colors inside the glass. Dust settles slowly on the shelf edge, unnoticed and unbothered. Somewhere an old record spins slowly on a turntable, though the needle has not yet touched down. The black surface catches a dim gleam of lamplight, turning, patient for the moment when sound might begin. A row of coats hangs in a hallway, wool and corduroy, each smelling faintly of cold air and someone else's day. A single scarf has slipped from its hook and pooled softly on the floor below. A snail moves across a damp stone path, slow beyond slow, leaving a faint silver trail behind it that catches the light for just a moment before fading. It is not going anywhere fast, and it does not need to. A kite sits folded in a drawer, its string wound carefully around a wooden spool, waiting for wind that isn't blowing today. Its colors are red and yellow, a little faded from summers spent outside. Somewhere a river moves under a stone bridge, wide and unhurried, carrying small twigs and leaves along its surface. The water is the color of tea, moving without sound, without opinion, simply moving. A row of birds sits along a telephone wire, evenly spaced, feathers ruffled slightly by a breeze. One shifts its weight from foot to foot. Another tilts its head. None of them are going anywhere just yet. A drawer full of old photographs sits half open in an attic, dust motes floating above it in a thin beam of light from a small window. The photographs show faces that are calm, unbothered, caught mid-laugh or mid-thought. None of it urgent anymore. A single apple sits on a wooden cutting board, uncut, red, and slightly dulled by the dim evening light. A knife rests beside it, unused, in no hurry to begin its work. Somewhere, snow falls silently over a small town, gathering on rooftops, softening the edges of chimneys and fence posts. A single light glows in an upstairs window, warm against the blue-gray dusk. A ball rolls slowly down a gentle grassy slope, over and over, unbothered by momentum or destination, coming finally to rest against the trunk of an old oak tree whose roots spread wide and steady into the earth. A row of test tubes sits in a wooden rack in an old chemistry classroom, empty, clean, catching small glints of light from a window. Chalk dust settles on the table nearby, undisturbed. Somewhere, an accordion rests folded on a chair, its bellows still, waiting for hands that are not in a hurry to return. A single dust mote drifts past it in the quiet afternoon air. A field of wheat moves in slow waves under a wide sky, golden and soft, bending and rising again as the wind passes through it, over and over, a rhythm with no beginning and no end. A single teacup sits on a saucer, a thin curl of steam rising from it, twisting slowly upward before dissolving into the room. Somewhere nearby, a clock on the wall ticks, unhurried, marking time that doesn't need to be marked. A row of umbrellas leans against a wall by a door, damp from earlier rain, dripping very slowly onto a mat below. Outside, the rain has stopped, and the street glistens quietly under a street lamp. Somewhere, a fishing boat drifts on calm water, its reflection wobbling gently on the surface, nets coiled neatly at its stern, waiting for morning, though morning is a long way off yet. A candle burns low in a glass jar on a windowsill, its flame small and steady, casting a soft, warm circle of light onto the sill and the dark glass of the window beyond it. A row of dominoes stands in a curving line across a wooden floor, each one leaning slightly against the next, waiting, though nobody has decided yet whether to tip the first one. Somewhere, an old wooden swing hangs from a thick branch, swaying just slightly, the ropes creaking softly, the seat empty, catching a small patch of afternoon sun. A single moth circles a porch light, slow loops, drifting closer and further, unhurried in its orbit, the light humming faintly. Insects unseen in the grass below going about their quiet business. A row of seashells sits on a windowsill, pale pink and cream, one still holding a faint trace of sand in its curve. Somewhere beyond the glass, waves fold over themselves again and again on a shore that never seems to tire of it. A pair of reading glasses rests folded on an open book, the pages softly curled at the corners, a bookmark tucked halfway through, marking a place that will still be there tomorrow. Somewhere, a lantern swings gently from a hook outside a cabin door, casting a small circle of warm light onto the porch steps. Moths and quiet night air gathering softly around it. A single canoe rests upturned on a riverbank, cool and damp with morning dew, waiting patiently for someone who is not in any rush to come find it. A row of spools of thread sits in a sewing box, blue, green, deep red, each one wound neat and tight, waiting for a needle that is, for now, simply resting in its little cushion. Somewhere, a field mouse moves through tall grass, small and quick, but unhurried in its own way, disappearing beneath a fallen log, leaving barely a trace of its passing. A single lamp glows in an otherwise dark room, casting soft yellow light over a stack of folded blankets on a chair. The rest of the room settled into calm, comfortable shadow. A row of old coins sits in a small tin box, dull and worn smooth from years of handling, each one holding a little history that nobody needs to remember right now. Somewhere, a paper lantern floats gently down a slow-moving river at dusk, flickering softly, joined by others drifting along beside it, all moving at the same unhurried pace toward the dark water ahead. A single pinecone lies on a bed of pine needles, brown and slightly open, releasing seeds so small they are barely visible, carried off eventually by wind or by nothing at all. A row of chairs sits stacked neatly in the corner of an empty hall, waiting for an event that has not yet been decided. The room quiet, the floor swept clean, dust settling slowly in patches of late light. Somewhere, A single cloud drifts low over a mountain ridge, catching the last orange light of evening, softening at its edges, thinning slowly until it's barely there at all. A ball of twine sits in a drawer beside a pair of scissors, both waiting, neither needed just yet. The twine slightly frayed at one end from some earlier use, now forgotten. A row of glass bottles sits along a windowsill, catching the last of the daylight, throwing small colored patches onto the floor, green, amber, pale blue, shifting slowly as the sun moves lower. Somewhere, an old wooden wheelbarrow rests tipped against a garden shed. A few stray leaves collected in its bed, damp from an earlier rain that has since moved on to somewhere else. A single spider spins a web in the corner of a window frame, slow, deliberate, each strand catching a small bead of light, the pattern growing wider and finer with each careful pass. A row of mismatched socks lies folded in a drawer, blue with a hole in the toe, gray with a faded stripe. None of them worried about matching anything tonight. Somewhere, a wind chime moves gently on a porch, its small metal tubes clinking softly. An unhurried, uneven little melody carried by air that barely counts as breeze. A single loaf of bread cools on a wire rack in a warm kitchen, its crust deep gold, a little steam still rising from a crack along the top, filling the room with a smell too soft to describe. A row of old maps sits rolled in a wooden cabinet, corners curling slightly. Ink faded to soft brown, marking places that may or may not still look the way they did when the ink was new. Somewhere, a single deer stands still at the edge of a forest clearing, ears turned slightly, unbothered, chewing slowly, in no hurry to move deeper into the trees or out into the open. A row of glass marbles rolls gently across a tilted wooden tray, clicking softly against the raised edge, coming to rest in a loose cluster near one corner. A single kettle sits on a stove, not yet boiling, water inside slowly warming, small bubbles beginning to form along the bottom, taking their unhurried time to rise. Somewhere, a field of lavender sways under a pale early evening sky, its scent drifting faintly on air that moves just enough to notice. bees moving slow and low among the stalks. A row of wooden blocks sits stacked in a nursery, uneven, a little crooked, red and blue and pale yellow, waiting quietly in a patch of soft carpet light. Somewhere, a single sailboat drifts far out on calm water, its sail barely filled, moving so slowly it seems almost still, the horizon wide and pale behind it. A row of clay pots sits along a garden wall, empty, waiting for spring. A little moss growing along their rims, cool to the touch, patient under a gray afternoon sky. Somewhere a single owl sits on a branch, feathers fluffed against the evening chill, eyes half closed, unbothered by the settling dark, waiting for a night that is arriving slowly, the way nights do. A row of old glass jars sits on a shelf in a cellar, each one holding something long forgotten, buttons, nails, a few smooth stones, dust gathering softly along their lids. Somewhere, a single paper airplane glides slowly across a quiet room, dipping gently, drifting sideways, landing at last beneath a chair where it will stay until someone remembers it. Let the mind keep wandering like this, from one small, unimportant thing to another, none of it needing to connect, none of it needing to mean anything at all. Just soft things, quiet things, still things, drifting past like clouds that don't ask to be followed. A single candle gutters low in its holder, the wax pooling soft and warm, the room around it dim and unhurried, shadows settling into their familiar corners. A row of books leans slightly in a shelf, spines worn, pages yellowed at the edges. None of them open, all of them simply resting there in the quiet dark. Somewhere, snow continues to fall over rooftops and fences, and the bare branches of winter trees, each flake settling softly onto the last, building nothing in particular, just softness upon softness. And here, in this space between waking and sleep, there is nothing left to hold on to, and nothing that needs holding. The yarn has unrolled all the way to stillness. The honey has settled deep in the cup. The snow has covered every field there is to cover. The candle has burned down low and quiet. Let your breathing slow to match the pace of falling snow. Let your thoughts scatter like dandelion seeds, drifting wherever they like, landing softly, needing nothing more from you. There is no list to finish here, no thread to follow to its end. Just this soft, dim, wandering hush, gentle as a held breath, let all the way out. Rest now in the stillness of the folded blanket, the closed book, the quiet cup of tea gone lukewarm on the table, the marble come to rest against the leg of the old bookshelf. Everything here has stopped moving, and so, gently, softly, without needing to decide anything at all, can you. But let the mind keep drifting a little longer, since there's no rush to stop it either. It can wander through a few more small rooms, a few more quiet corners of the world, none of them connected, none of them asking anything of you. A single umbrella stand holds 3 umbrellas near a front door, one striped, one plain black, one faded green. None of them needed tonight, since the rain has already passed and the pavement outside has begun to dry in long, uneven patches. Somewhere, a row of potted basil sits on a kitchen windowsill, leaves a soft, dusty green, tilting slightly toward the last light of the day. A few crumbs of soil scattered on the sill beneath them. A single wooden xylophone rests on a rug in a quiet playroom, its bars catching a little lamplight. A small mallet resting beside it, neither one making a sound just now. A row of glass Christmas ornaments sits wrapped in tissue paper inside a cardboard box in an attic, waiting out the long months between winters, catching the occasional glint of light through a small round vent. Somewhere, a single tortoise moves across a garden path, slow beyond slowness, pausing to nibble at a clover leaf, in no hurry at all, since hurrying has never really been part of its nature. A row of paintbrushes stands in a jar of cloudy water on a windowsill, bristles softened, colors bleeding faintly into the water in thin curling ribbons of blue and ochre. A single wooden clock sits on a mantel, its pendulum swinging in slow, even arcs back and forth, marking time that nobody in the room is paying much attention to. Somewhere, a field of poppies nods gently in a light breeze, red petals catching the sun, bending and rising in a slow rhythm that has no particular hurry to it. A row of glass fishing floats hangs from a net on a porch wall, each one a different soft color: faded green, pale blue, dull amber, turning very slightly whenever the air moves. A single wooden rowboat sits tied to a dock, bumping gently against the wood with each small wave, the rope slack, the oars resting quietly inside. Somewhere, a cat curls into a tight circle on a windowsill, tail tucked over its nose, eyes closed, breathing slow, and even entirely unbothered by the passing of the afternoon. A row of teacups hangs from small hooks under a kitchen shelf, each one painted with faint flowers, swaying just slightly whenever a door somewhere in the house closes softly. A single lighthouse stands at the edge of a quiet cliff, its beam sweeping slowly across dark water, round and round, patient, steady, needing nothing from the ships that may or may not be out there. Somewhere, a row of onions hangs braided together from a kitchen beam, papery skins rustling faintly whenever the air stirs, their smell soft and earthy in the warm evening kitchen. A single wooden xylophone of raindrops falls on a tin roof somewhere far away, an uneven, gentle rhythm, tapping softly, never quite settling into a pattern, never needing to. A row of glass beads sits strung on a thread across a windowsill, each one catching a small piece of afternoon light, red, green, clear, turning it into a tiny scattered rainbow on the wall behind. Somewhere, a single wooden gate creaks very softly on its hinge, swinging just an inch in the breeze before settling back into place, over and over, in no particular hurry to close all the way. A row of ripe tomatoes sits on a sunny windowsill, deep red, a little dust on their skins, waiting to be noticed by someone who isn't in any rush to notice them tonight. Somewhere, a single hot air balloon drifts high above a patchwork of green and gold fields, small as a coin from the ground, moving with the wind, going wherever the wind happens to be going. A row of wine corks sits in a glass jar on a shelf, each one slightly different, some stained deep red at the tip, some pale and plain, none of them remembering which bottle they came from. Somewhere, a single wooden mill wheel turns slowly in a shallow stream, dripping water in a steady, unhurried rhythm, the sound blending into the quiet murmur of the water around it. A row of pressed flowers lies flat between the pages of an old book, faded to soft pastel colors, paper thin, holding the shape of petals that bloomed a long time ago and don't mind being remembered so quietly. Somewhere, a single firefly blinks on and off in a dark garden, drifting low over the grass, joined slowly by a few others, small, soft lights appearing and disappearing without any pattern at all. A row of wooden nesting dolls stands open on a shelf, each one a little smaller than the last, tucked one inside another, waiting patiently in a neat little line that goes from large to small to smallest. Somewhere, a single canoe paddle leans against a porch railing, droplets of water still clinging to its blade, catching the very last of the evening light before the sky finally lets go of it. A row of glass jam jars sits cooling on a folded towel on a kitchen counter, lids ticking very softly as they seal, one small metallic click at a time, spaced far apart, unhurried. Somewhere, a single field of tall grass bends all in one direction under a slow, steady wind, rippling like water, rising and falling in long, soft waves that never quite break. A row of wooden clothespins sits clipped along the edge of a basket, waiting to hold something up to dry, though for now they simply rest there, small and plain and patient. Somewhere, a single star appears in a darkening sky, faint at first, then a little clearer, joined slowly by a few more, none of them in any hurry to be the brightest. A row of stone steps leads up a quiet hillside, moss growing in the cracks between them, worn smooth in the middle from years of feet that have long since gone home for the evening. Somewhere, a single wooden birdhouse hangs from a low branch, empty for now, swaying just slightly, waiting for a spring that will come whenever it decides to come. A row of glass buoys bobs gently on calm harbor water, red and white, tethered loosely to a line, rising and falling with a rhythm too slow and soft to really be called movement at all. Somewhere, a single moth rests on a screen door, wings folded flat, perfectly still, undisturbed by the porch light glowing warm just a few inches away. A row of dried lavender bundles hangs upside down from a kitchen beam. Small purple buds slowly losing their color, filling the room with a scent too faint to really notice unless you stop and breathe it in. Somewhere, a single wooden raft floats slowly downstream, turning very gently as it goes, catching against a low branch for a moment before drifting free again, unbothered by the small delay. Let all of these little things settle now, the way dust settles, the way snow settles, the way a held breath settles into something slower and easier. None of them need finishing. None of them need remembering. They can simply be left where they are, quiet and unconnected, while your own thoughts grow slower and softer and further apart, like footsteps fading down a long hallway that leads gently into sleep. A single soft gray blanket settles over the whole of this, folding in at the edges, warm and unhurried, and there is nothing left now but the quiet and the dark and the slow, even rhythm of your own breathing, carrying you the rest of the way down into rest. And still, if there's a little more room in the mind for wandering, let it wander a while longer, through a few more small, quiet, unconnected places, none of them waiting for you to arrive, none of them needing you to stay. A single wooden ladder leans against the side of a barn, its rungs worn smooth and pale. A few dry leaves gathered at its base, undisturbed since the last time anyone climbed it. Somewhere, a row of glass milk bottles sits on a doorstep in the early morning light, condensation beating softly on their sides, waiting for a hand that isn't in any hurry to collect them. A single wooden pinwheel spins slowly in a garden bed, red and yellow, catching just enough breeze to keep turning, never fast, never really stopping either. A row of folded napkins sits, stacked on a table, plain white linen, pressed into neat squares, waiting for a meal that hasn't been decided on yet. Somewhere, a single duck glides across a still pond, leaving a soft, V-shaped ripple behind it that widens and fades before it reaches the reeds at the edge. A row of glass perfume bottles sits on a dresser, each one a different pale color, catching small points of lamp light, stoppers resting loosely in their necks. Somewhere, a single wooden seesaw sits still in an empty playground, one end slightly lower than the other, waiting in the quiet dusk for children who have all gone home for supper. A row of dried corn cobs hangs from a porch railing, husks pale gold, rustling faintly whenever the evening air stirs just enough to notice. Somewhere, a single paper kite lies folded in the grass of a wide open field, its string looped loosely around a stick, waiting for wind that has wandered off somewhere else for now. A row of glass canning jars sits cooling on a wooden shelf in a pantry, lids catching small points of afternoon light. Rows and rows of deep red and green preserved inside. Somewhere, a single wooden weather vane turns slightly atop a barn roof, creaking so softly it's almost not a sound at all, pointing first one way, then settling back the other. A row of soft gray pebbles lines the bottom of a shallow glass bowl on a windowsill, each one smooth, each one slightly different, none of them going anywhere at all. Somewhere, a single field of sunflowers turns slowly to follow a sun that is already beginning to lower itself toward the horizon, their heavy heads bowing just slightly with the movement. A row of wooden spoons hangs from hooks above a stove, each one a slightly different shade of brown, worn smooth from years of slow, unhurried stirring. Somewhere, a single hammock sways gently between two trees, empty, the rope creaking now and then. A few fallen leaves gathered in its lowest curve. A row of glass snow globes sits on a shelf, each one still, the fake snow inside settled long ago into soft white drifts at the bottom, waiting for a hand that isn't in any rush to shake them. Somewhere, a single wooden bench sits at the edge of a quiet park, damp with evening dew, facing a pond where the last ducks are settling in among the reeds for the night. A row of ripe pears sits in a shallow wooden bowl, soft yellow-green, a little dust on their skins, filling the room faintly with a smell too gentle to really notice. Somewhere, a single old bicycle bell sits rusted but still bright at the edges, resting quietly on its handlebar, unrung for a long while now, patient and unbothered by the silence. A row of glass buttons glints faintly in a sewing tin, tangled loosely with a few loose threads, none of it sorted, none of it needing to be. Somewhere, a single field of tall cattails sways at the edge of a marsh, brown heads nodding gently, the water beneath them dark and still and unhurried. A row of wooden picture frames leans against a wall in an empty room, each one holding a photograph of somewhere calm, a beach, a forest path, a quiet kitchen table, none of them needing to be hung up just yet. Somewhere, a single moth-eaten quilt lies, folded at the foot of a bed, patchwork squares, faded soft with age, waiting patiently for a cold night that hasn't quite arrived. A row of glass test tube vases holds single stems of wildflowers along a windowsill, each one simple, each one unbothered by the others, catching the last soft light of the afternoon. Somewhere, a single wind-up music box sits closed on a shelf, its small mechanism resting, its tune unplayed for now, waiting in patient silence for a hand that isn't in any hurry to turn the key. A row of stone garden markers leans slightly in soft earth, names and dates worn nearly smooth, marking rows of vegetables that have long since finished growing for the season. Somewhere, a single paper lantern hangs from a porch eave, unlit, swaying just slightly, waiting for a dusk that is still gathering itself slowly at the edges of the sky. A row of glass fish bowls sits empty on a shop shelf, dust gathering faintly along their curved edges, waiting for water and fish and a little bit of green weed that haven't arrived yet. Somewhere, a single field mouse nibbles quietly at a fallen seed near the base of an old stone wall, unhurried, unseen, simply going about its own small, quiet evening. A row of wooden dominoes lies scattered loosely across a rug, some upright, some flat, a game abandoned somewhere in the middle, nobody minding that it was never finished. Somewhere, a single soft gray moth settles on a lampshade, wings folded flat, still, content to stay there in the warm, dim light for as long as it likes. Let all of this settle now too, the way everything else has settled softly, without needing tidying, without needing an ending. The pinwheel slows, The duck reaches the reeds. The lantern stays unlit a little while longer. None of it needs you anymore. One last handful of small, quiet things. Then, before the mind lets go completely, a single wooden birdcage hangs empty in a sunroom, door open, perch still. A few soft feathers caught between the bars from a visitor long since flown off. Somewhere, a row of glass ink bottles sits on an old writing desk, corks pressed in tight, colors dulled behind the glass. A fountain pen resting beside them with its nib capped. A single stone well sits at the center of an old courtyard, its bucket resting on the ledge, rope coiled loosely. The water far below invisible in the dark, and utterly still. A row of wool blankets sits folded at the end of a cedar chest, each one a slightly different color, faded red, soft gray, dusty blue, waiting for a winter that will come in its own time. Somewhere, a single paper fan lies open on a table, painted with a faint pattern of pale blossoms, its folds catching small shadows in the low evening light. A row of glass thermometers hangs on a garden shed wall, mercury settled low and unbothered, none of them measuring anything urgent tonight. Somewhere, a single wooden compass sits on a shelf, its needle drifting very slowly before settling toward a direction that nobody in the room needs right now. A row of dried apple slices lies spread across a mesh tray in a warm kitchen, curling slightly at the edges, filling the air with a faint, sweet, unhurried scent. Somewhere, a single stone fountain trickles softly in a quiet courtyard, water sliding over smooth carved edges, falling into a shallow pool below with a sound too even to really be called noise. A row of glass buttons sits loose in a tin, catching small points of lamp light whenever the tin is tilted, though nobody is tilting it just now. Somewhere, a single field of clover stretches out beside a quiet lane, dotted here and there with small white blossoms, unbothered by the evening settling slowly over it. A row of wicker baskets sits stacked near a back door, empty, sun-bleached, waiting for a harvest that is still a few slow weeks away. Somewhere, a single wooden weather vane creaks once, very softly, before settling back into stillness atop a barn that has seen many such evenings before this one. A row of glass jars filled with dried herbs sits along a kitchen shelf. Thyme, rosemary, sage. Each one releasing the faintest whisper of scent whenever the air in the room shifts. Somewhere a single moth-soft evening settles fully now over rooftops and gardens and quiet winding lanes, the last light fading to a deep, unhurried blue. Let this be the last small handful then. Let the pinwheel stop turning. Let the duck disappear into the reeds. Let the ink dry unused in its bottle. Let the well go dark and quiet at its center. None of it is going anywhere. None of it needs to be picked up, finished, remembered, or understood. It can all simply stay exactly where it is, soft and still and unconnected, while your own thoughts slow down to match it, breath by breath, until there's nothing left to notice at all.